Welcome, everyone. It's an honor to be with you all, joining and gathering today for our Resist, Reimagine, Rebuild, a call to action for education equity and racial justice with the Sharif El-Mekki. So good afternoon. Before we go any further, I wanted to make sure that we have our executive director here with us this afternoon, Chad D. Lassiter, and to have us some opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Anita. Good afternoon, everyone. Want to thank all of the PHRC staff for being in this beloved community virtual space. Want to thank all of our colleagues from the Commonwealth. I see a lot of you here who are here as well, and want to thank other stakeholders who are here. We're very appreciative to have ASL here. Those of you who are at PHRC, you've heard this standard line, and I really mean it from my heart. ASL is not just a discipline, it's truly a blessing. So for both of our ASL colleagues who are here, we thank you from the bottom of our beloved community heart. Really excited to have a dear colleague of mine who's going to be presenting today, someone who I've admired from afar for a considerable period of time, but over the past 2 years with work both he and I have been doing with the former administration, Biden-Harris White House, we slowed down, and in particular, I slowed down and said, we need to get you in the space at the PHRC because we need to know what you know. And so for PHRC, we're going to be partnering with him and an annual conference that he has. So happy to have him here. I would tell all of you to put on your metaphoric seatbelts, get your real pens out and your real paper, because this is a person who is a true educator at heart, truly is concerned about our children, our families, and our communities, and sees the value in Black educators, and as in particular, Black male educators that make a difference. There's a lot of qualitative and quantitative data that speaks to the importance of Black male teachers and Black teachers in general, not just for students of color, but also for students in general. But we don't want to escape the fact that Black teachers matter for Black students. So once again, Anita, want to thank you and Director Brothman for putting this together. The flyer is aesthetically appealing. We're here, and thank you for all those who are joining. Lastly, for those who were not able to join, all of our PHRC Lunch and Learns, PHRC Diversity Speaks live on our YouTube page. So we always follow up with that. So feel free to utilize that and pass it along to some of your colleagues for whatever reason weren't able to make it. So once again, welcome to everyone.
Thank you, Edie Lassiter. Thank you so much. Thank you for mentioning the YouTube page, and thank you for bringing in such dynamic resources. We do appreciate that. That shows just that the high level of just professional development that you have, not only for the PHRC, but our stakeholders. So thank you, Edie. We appreciate you for that. So without any further ado, Sharif El-Mekki, CEO and founder, Center for Black Educator Development, CBED. El-Mekki is also a former educator, principal, and a U.S. Department of Education Principal Ambassador Fellow. His school, Mastery Charter Shoemaker, received recognition from Oprah Winfrey, President Obama, and the prestigious EPIC Award 3 consecutive years for accelerating student achievement levels. In 2014, El-Mekki established the fellowship Black Male Educators for Social Justice, aiming to recruit and develop Black male teachers. El-Mekki is a blogger on Philly's 7th Ward, a member of the podcast 8 Black Hands and Freedom Friday, and serves on several boards and committees focused on educational and racial justice. Please give Sharif El-Mekki a Diversity Speaks PHRC welcome here. Thank you so much for being with us today. The floor is yours, Mr. Sharif El-Mekki.
Thank you so much. Appreciate being here. Honored to be here. Just being in community with others who are interested in equity and justice as you do the work. And so that is the framing that I want to start with. And I'm appreciative of Chad for inviting me and the support that we've had. I had a little technical support, so your colleague will advance the slides for me. But really just as I was a teacher and a principal, for 26 years, it was so important to center the voices of the students and the community. Then they actually informed us creating our organization. They said that they needed more Black teachers. They said they needed to see themselves represented in the classroom. And at the same time, we were seeing all of the research around that. And I'll speak more about that because not only do we have research around that particular year, but longitudinal. I'll just give a hint and we'll get into it a little bit later, but a Black child, particularly a student that's struggling with poverty, if they have a Black teacher, they are up to 39% less likely to drop out of high school, up to 29% more likely to go to college. And at the same time, as Chad mentioned earlier, it has no negative impact on any other student, no matter what their demographics are. So having a Black teacher pipeline is, one of the most important interventions and underfunded interventions, deregulated interventions that we could possibly have. So this is, just an example of like what we need to resist as far as the dismantling of the Black teacher pipeline, reimagine it, and rebuild it in a way that's sustainable, protected, and predictable. Thank you. So, as we know, W.B. Du Bois, not only did he do a ton of work here in Philadelphia, but he worked in the 7th Ward, which is around South Philly, downtown area. Matter of fact, that's why we called the blog Philly 7th Ward at that time. Even though he was commissioned by University of Pennsylvania, he was not allowed to have an office there. But he did the work in the 7th Ward. And one of the things that he talked about was the connection between education and liberation. You can imagine after enslavement and people striving to become literate. And at that time, there was as far as the human history that's been recorded, it was the largest growth of literacy with any peoples that had ever been seen. And that was, of course, after enslavement and joining schools. But W.B. Du Bois, he draws a parallel to the impact of schools and like, what does it mean? Where the more educated you are, the more you can critique the systems that you're a part of. You can critique and analyze the oppressions that are there, the inequities that exist, if you are literate. And he talked about that, but he also said, like, we should not think that just because we're up north and the down south, and that's where most of the enslavement happened in the latter part of the 1800s. He drew that parallel. And when we look at that today, we see the inequities regardless of, where we are. And sad to say, in America today, there's not a city in mass that is educating all of their children well. Regardless, despite the wealth, despite the technology, there's not a single city that we can say in mass, all of the students, that's a great city for, for their students to grow up, graduate, and be educated in. And so we have a lot of work to do to, regardless of this. And that bottom quote, where he described Negroes, Black people being admitted and tolerated, but not educated, which is a very different thing than centering their voices, centering their education. Next slide, please. As a principal, these are the two, I think, quotes that I would center my work on, and I wanted our staff to center our work on. One is Lerone Bennett, where he talked about the role of an educator, where they are, what their mindsets are. If we believe mindsets matter most, and that informs all of our work, he said an educator, and I take that whether they're K-12, whether they're training other folks, whether they're in the university system, they have a decision to make of whether they are doing damage to the systems that may be inequitable, or they're doing damage to children and communities. And Dr. Carter G. Woodson, we know this is the 100th anniversary of Black History Month. Dr. Carter G. Woodson was the founder of that he built off of. Originally, it was Frederick Douglass Day by Mary Church Terrell, who created that. He built on that for Negro History Week, and now we have entire month. But he said there would be no lynching if it weren't for a schoolhouse. And our staff would look at that to center that this educational endeavor was a critical part of any of the work that we were doing, because the inequities that get embedded in people's minds, the racial biases that they may harbor, so often it's reinforced in our schools, in our educational systems, in our curricula, and maybe even by, and often, unfortunately, by educators ourselves. And so these two will really like help frame and make sure that my orientation and our staff's orientation and work was aligned to, at least try to strive for racial and academic achievement and justice. Thank you. So in Pennsylvania, just for a little context, when we talk about the need for diversity, when we talk about the students ask for hashtag we need Black teachers that they were so adamant about. This was part of the data that they were looking at. And while it has improved slightly since 2022, we still have a long ways to go. And almost half of our schools, not only in Pennsylvania, is very similar to the country itself. Almost half the schools have absolutely no teachers of color, even though students of color are continuing to grow. And even white students say in data and research that people have done, they say they would like a more diverse educated workforce. Right now, 80% of public school teachers are white. About 70% of them are white women. And even white students are saying we need more diversity in our educated workforce. Most schools, as you all probably know, they have something about preparing students to be global citizens, yet they're usually unable to practice that while they're in their pre-K to 12th grade experience. So as educators, we have decisions to make. And so one of the things that we did when students said that we need Black teachers, we decided to design a program right there at the school, Shoemaker, where I was. And we designed really three programs that we looked at that could help reinforce, reimagine, and invite them into the profession, but also create this sustainable plan. So one of them was around, first we wanted to make sure we were drawing from Black teaching traditions, because often when you learn about educational theory, if you're going to school to learn to become a leader in universities across the state as well as the country, we learn about European or white American educational theorists, behavior theorists, child psychologists. It's rare that there's any diversity in studying the people who develop theories, who develop research around how to educate children well, particularly Black children, children that from every data point continue to struggle because of the system. There's nothing wrong with the children, but there is something wrong with our system when it is constantly reinforcing the outcomes that we have. And one of the things that we noticed was that Black students or Black educators like Carter G. Woodson, before Carter G. Woodson, he's known for Black History Month, but this man was a teacher and a principal. This man was a university professor. This man went around the country developing teachers and principals, but it's rare that we'll find any of his pedagogical frameworks. It's rare that we'll find any of Mary McLeod Bethune's frameworks when we're designing schools, when we're designing pedagogy. We'll hear her name, but she developed a school. She had a system, and the system was immensely successful. But these are the folks who are absolutely erased in our educator prep programmings. And our push was to say, you know what, let's make sure that we are researching what are Black teaching traditions and how do we reintroduce it into the landscape. What were Black child psychologists like Dr. Amos? What was he saying about the development and the psychological needs of a Black child in systems that exist today? And so that was the start of our work to begin honing in on these, drilling them down, and not just saving them for adults, but introducing them to students. If you recall, when you were in school, many of you probably were not confronted or invited to interrogate the educational theory that the school or district decided to use to teach you, to educate you. There are theories that people decide, we're going to use this versus this. We feel this is the best educational theory and philosophy, and this is what we're going to use to teach our students. We introduce those to our high school students and say, here are different theories. Which one would you use? Which one would you use to design a school? Which one do you think you would flourish in best? And they also have the opportunities to practice this during the summer as a paid apprenticeship, where they're teaching first, second, and third graders. And these are high school students and college students who are the actual teachers, and they're coached by our staff. But they're learning from Black educational theorists about, like, how did people design schools, and not just from Black American, but all the way from Africa. What were teaching strategies that were used that were maybe strained during the Middle Passage, but not broken, and continued to be passed along? But then also, what was codified and researched and implemented in the 5,000 schools for Black children that were created immediately after enslavement, all the way through the 1900s. So I want to give credit to Dr. Koso-Lassane for coming up and coining Black teaching traditions, where it centers community and resilience and cultural responsiveness. This idea of being inclusive, and while it was designed for Black children, it is welcoming and open to everyone, because it is really a human-centered focus on how to teach, how to build, how to create community. And so you think about that. Sometimes, if you know educators, you may have heard them speak about classroom management. Like, how do I manage the behaviors of children? And Black teaching traditions is looked at as, how do I develop community? How do I build community, as opposed to how do I manage a child? Two different mindsets, two different outlooks, two different orientations, but one builds community and centers that community, and how a teacher is communicating, I'm successful if you're successful, and you're successful if I'm successful. So let's build and work together. That is centering, and that's just good teaching. That's just good education. But we often find that, many teachers, they say that we're unprepared to teach. And when we ask them about teaching students that are from different cultural backgrounds, that number spiked to almost 70%. And this is not our study. This is Temple University study about early career teachers, and how many of them said they are unprepared to teach. We believe that Black teaching traditions would improve their preparation, improve their readiness, and most importantly, improve their effectiveness to teaching in our schools, whether their children are Black or otherwise. We believe the Black teaching traditions have been not centered, not included even, in many of our educator prep programs. So I want to center our very own Philadelphian, Dr. Gloria Ladson-Billings, Overbrook High School graduate. She's now works at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. And she really started pushing this idea that cultural responsiveness was a critical part of any work. Not just teaching, but any time we're engaging communities, we should have a cultural responsive framework to operate in. That should inform our mindset. It should inform our policies, our curricula, and our work. And centering communities and their well-being, how we relate to them, how we respond, how we honor and respect them, is the foundation for success and achievement. And so we just wanted to make sure we're recognizing Gloria Ladson-Billings with the culture responsive pedagogy, but her framework is relevant anywhere. It's relevant within any type of work if we're working with community. So how will we reimagine this? Right now, Black, as Chad mentioned earlier, Black men make up about 1.3% of public school teachers around the country. 1.3%. In places like Philadelphia, as diverse as it is, that number still hovers between 4 and 5%. However, the students we're in high schools right now. Our goal is to expand to 40 high schools around the country. We're in New York, both Harlem and Rochester, Philadelphia, and Washington, D.C. About 30% of our students in these schools are young men. So there's something that's attracting them to this profession through this coursework and the engagement and this cultural responsiveness that's not recruiting or sustaining them as adults in, across the country. But what we're seeing is a lot of it is just how they are being educated. We had young men who said two things that in our focus groups from around the country that continue to sear my heart when I think about it. One, young men said, "Yes, I want to be a teacher because I want to become the teacher I wish I had and knew I needed." And he talked about the experience that he had, because we have many students who say, I don't want to become a teacher. I don't want to return to that. Dr. Chris Emden, our friend in New York, professor at NYU, said that recruiting young Black students to become teachers is like recruiting someone to return to the scene of a crime committed against themselves. And so that is because of the experiences that they have in our schools, both pre-K to 12th grade. Yale did a study not too long ago where they said Black children as early initially experienced their teachers' racial biases as early as 3 and 4 years old. 3 and 4. That's pre-K. That's daycare. But they're already experiencing racial biases. And they don't have the language for it, but they're experiencing feeling othered, not feeling fully human, seeing that their needs aren't being met. That doesn't dissipate as they get older. If anything, it calcifies, intensifies, and becomes even more problematic for their experiences in schools. The other group of young men and again, these are national focus groups. They said, we want to become teachers, but we asked them what gives them pause. They said, what gives us pause is we want to be teachers, but we would not want to be colleagues of some of the teachers we have today. And so again, it's speaking to their experience of, I want to teach, I want to lead classrooms of my own, but my experience right now in this space is something I don't want to experience, and also something I don't want to carry forth. And I don't want to be colleagues of people who are making me feel this way. And so the work is vast, and not only in schools, but also, I would say, adjacent to schools, to make sure that we're having a humanistic approach, holistic, and the cultural competence and restorative. The whole idea is to expand our aperture and decrease our blind spots. That in itself, to have a level of empathy, but also understanding, and this is why we believe Black history is important. The history of Black education is important. Black teaching traditions are important. All of this can make us better informed, and by shrinking our blind spots, we're much better equipped to work with other people across differences. So how we reimagine this is again starting with high school students. We know that their experiences have to be different, but we also have to invite them into the profession and then think about long term, how do we build a pipeline? How do we start early on? That's the foundation is how they experience schools, all the way to how are they sustained once they get to our classrooms. We work with young Black men who talk about their experiences in schools, and they say, we call it the trifecta. It's three things that they're struggling with. It's their first time experiencing professionalized racism, professionalized racial biases. It's in this professional setting. So they're grappling with that. How do I navigate this? At the same time, they're seeing policies that they know oppressed them when they were younger, and they are being called to continue that oppression. They're seeing that, and they're saying, like, I don't want it. I believe this policy has racial biases, racial undertones. I believe that this is not a just policy. But then the third part of it is, it's also triggering because they may have experienced this themselves. So not only are they remembering when they were in these same seats, but then they're also trying to protect children or making the decision to go along, to get along, but still internally having that tension, but then also experiencing it as professionals themselves. So this is a pipeline. And when we started working with Research for Action here in Philadelphia, they do national work, but based in Philadelphia. we really wanted to look at like the pipeline and really step back and look at because it's one thing to say, oh, we just need to recruit more Black teachers without really understanding the depth of the issue. In Pennsylvania, we had a 60% decrease in Black students who were going to college to become teachers. And there was a decrease overall, but particularly 60% less for Black students, and this continues with whether it's the struggles and underfunding of HBCUs or just the experiences that they have in schools. But you can see with 36% of the students of color, and then that drops off to about 6% of teachers of color across the state. And there are leaks in the pipeline all along the way. And so the structures, how we reimagine, this has to be reimagined. How they experience school, how they're invited into the profession, how they're supported, the expense of becoming a teacher, the hoops that have to be navigated in order to become certified and become a teacher. And then once we get there, when we talk about integration, we have to also remember, Dr. King's remarks of him, are we integrating into a burning house? Because sometimes we're inviting teachers of color into a burning schoolhouse because they're experienced not only as adults, but also as students in our schools. And so we have a lot of work to do. But again, if we center Dr. Gloria Ladson Billings and Dr. Koso Lasane's and others' work from all parts of the pipeline, we can make progress, we believe. And so just, again, I mentioned this earlier, but just want to, again, center like some of the folks who, when we think about the history, when people hear about like, what, Black teaching traditions, Black educational theory, that must be new. And we're like, no, it's not new. Schools, there were schools in West Africa. There were teachers who were brought over here in chains. This didn't just start from zero. There are community and cultural awareness that occurs, and this is why we have people who can command a room full of children or adults and break down complex issues. But the main thing that they're doing is centering community. We have agents of change that's highlighted. We mentioned Dr. Carter G. Woodson before. People don't realize the connectivity between educational justice and racial justice. So Dr. Martin Luther King's mother was a traditionally trained teacher, and that's something our students wrestle with. She was a traditionally trained teacher who was fired after she got married, because back then, if women were married, they were released from their positions as teachers. But here was a woman who was a teacher, and then she was also a mother who's usually a child's first teacher. And so they talk about and discuss, okay, what are some of the seeds that she planted in Dr. King? Later, he would hire Septima Clark. Many people recognize her for her civil rights work and her trainings that she did, including Rosa Parks, where she trained her. But she was a teacher. She was a teacher in South Carolina who was fired because she advocated for equal pay for Black teachers and white teachers. Barbara Collins, taking on students who Chicago public schools said they were incorrigible and uneducatable. And she built a school and proved them wrong. They were drawing on theories, philosophies, and anchors that we should all continue to learn from, whether it's culture responsive pedagogy. It means it's including the relevance and the history and the culture and the community. Community-based learning, where we don't look at communities as a deficit and just saying, hey, send them to the school and we'll fix them. Too often, that's the theory of our educational system, where no, the student was whole. They felt loved. It was our system of pre-K to 12th grade that may ended up breaking their spirits. But they came joyful. They came happy. They came feeling loved. And then resilience and resistance. How have Black educators, if you've ever had a chance to read Dr. Jarvis Given's book, Fugitive Pedagogy, he talks about the legacy of Black educators in the civil rights movement and before then, and as well as afterwards. So not only are there people like Septima Clark, but even when people think that Dr. Martin Luther King started the Montgomery bus boycott. He was called in to support it. It was actually started by Joanne Robinson, a Black teacher. We often hear about Ida B. Wells, and her work to end lynching, put the spotlight on lynching, the perpetrators of these type of murders, but also ending it. Ida B. Wells was a teacher. So during this time, particularly in the early 1900s to mid 1900s, through civil rights, as well as I would say the Black Power movement, so many educators were part of that work, in the forefront of the work. They were leaders amongst leaders, activists amongst activists, and sharing that and making sure we continue that legacy is part of the way forward. And so again, centering Black teaching tradition, I have to highlight, this is the school I went to, at elementary school, and you can see how young we are, but that teacher is Mama Fasaha Trailer, who's still, working hard in teaching, and she's obviously retired now, but very much so still the activist, the informer, the teacher, the leader that we experienced as a child. And so applying this to how we've been centering the work in our organization, we're obviously uplifting student voices. We need Black teachers. You can always see, where that has led us to over the course of the past 6.5 years. Culture responsive pedagogy, making sure that we are responding to communities, centering communities, honoring communities, and then at the same time ensuring that the experiences that people have. And so while I'm speaking from a school system framework, I firmly believe that these are very similar to what my friend Dr. Eli Stanford talks about in the medical profession. The need for more diversity, the need to have culture responsive pedagogy in medicine, and deciding like, okay, you know what, when we look at the data and show like the experiences that too many people of color have in hospitals, whether it's women's and maternal health, whether it's the experiences of pain and whether it's taken seriously, or whether, things like the amputee level of diabetes patients, you can almost predict it based off of race. And not because of the actual disease, but because of the treatment that's offered. So we see this in many different systems, not just educational system, but it's the same type of framework that can be applied in other places, other workplaces. Schools, absolutely, education, but elsewhere as well, whether it's in law, whether it's in medicine, whether it's in economics, we see very similar representation, responsiveness to the community, and being seen and heard and valued for your experiences. So we believe this framework, while we're talking about it from a teaching perspective, we believe that it is applicable to many, many settings. So you saw the pipeline earlier with all the leaks. We often, you hear people talking about reimagining. This is how we reimagined the pipeline. And a lot of this we are actually actively implementing. And so in high school, making sure that their introduction to teaching, their experience with teaching, and their practice of teaching is all centered. And using opportunities, whether it's career technical ed courses or dual enrollment courses, our partnerships with Community College of Philadelphia and Temple University, the curriculum that they have, the summer paid apprenticeship that they can experience as they mentor first, second, and third graders and are mentored by college students and our staff. And that continues as they graduate. We knew that often we would hear people around the country who would say like, oh, we want more Black teachers. And we would ask them, what's your retention plan? What's your support plan? If not, you'll have people come in the front door and run out the back door based off of their experiences. And so working with schools to ensure that there's a better experience, not only for their students, but also for staff. We have many, when I talk about the 1.3% of black men teachers, many of them are alone and lonely in their school. And that experience and what that means. And then all the way through early career. We know that it's expensive to become a teacher. College degrees have exponentially become, less affordable. And so we wanted to make sure that recruiting youth to become teachers isn't disconnected from the social, political, and economic realities of becoming a teacher. And so those are all the different ways that we're trying to look at. We raise money for scholarships so that if they want to become a teacher, if they did our program at one of these schools, they want to become a teacher, we want to make sure that they have not only community and professional development support, but they also have financial resources. And so we raise about $40,000 per student. And we have about 230 of them this spring, where they'll get $20,000 as they matriculate through college. And then once they get to their 5th year of teaching, they get a $20,000 check. And this is theirs. We can't address necessarily the policy directly for their starting salary, but we can at least try to help them be as debt-free as possible. And so for them, $20K while they're in school, $5K a year as they matriculate through college. And then imagine in your 5th year, I wish I had this when I got to my 5th year of teaching, but then a $20,000, retention stipend, and it's theirs. We do financial literacy. We want them to be aware of like what to do. They do have to pay taxes on it, those kind of things. But if they want to pay down loans, if they want to just save it, if they want to invest it, if they want to make a down deposit on something, it's theirs. But that's our connectivity to, okay, how do we make sure that the recruitment also is tied to the retention? And how do we make sure that this call for more Black teachers isn't disconnected from the social, political, and economic realities of becoming and remaining a Black teacher? And we won't spend too much time on this, but just wanted to give you a sample of when we say, Black teaching traditions or culture responsive pedagogy. These are just some of the strands that are built in to our programming. And you can see that some of this is, while it's educational based, it can often be applicable to in other spaces. Strand 3 talks about equitable cultural representation in classrooms, workplaces, internships, apprenticeships, or other places. Number 5 is around high expectations. People often ask me, well, if you had a magic wand, how would you change schools? And I always start off, the number one thing I would ask to change is higher expectations for the adults that they hold themselves to, and also how they hold the students to. That and building community together is one of the most critical components of building a functional school system. And too often the expectations are very low. Self-efficacy of the leaders of schools, classrooms, and districts are very in this community. Next slide, please. These are what our high school students are implementing. Imagine it, and remember, these are high school and college students who are working with 1st, 2nd, and 3rd graders. And so they're positioning, okay, how do I represent professionalism? How do I build community? Remember the difference between looking to manage a group of students or build a community with those group of students. How do I collaborate and communicate with with families? How do I use technology? How am I using AI equitably, ethically? How am I designing the classroom? When I first I graduated from Overbrook High School, which is, at least probably around 100 years old. But then when I was reading research, because so many of the school buildings look the same in the city, and then I saw that there was a firm that in the early 1900s that was hired to design a lot of our Philadelphia schools was the same firm that their previous experience was building mental institutions around the country. So even thinking about that, like, okay, if your only experience was building mental institutions, and then you're hired to build schools, like, it just struck me where, when we think about the design of a school, and even much later, I worked at a school where all the windows were fogged over. You couldn't see out of the windows. And when I asked about that, they said, oh, the designers and the district said that they didn't want students distracted. But we know research says like you should have sunlight, as much as possible. A building should be bright, classrooms should be bright. But here were windows that were shaded over, like with this icy material where you couldn't really see outside. And so imagine being in a building all day like that. So even just the physical design, these are things that our high school and college students are grappling with and thinking about. And so where we are, as I said, this will be our year 7 this May. Our goal is to be in 40 high schools. We're in 9 now. We're looking to add another 5 or 6 this fall. And we exist with real challenges and that tension. But we're not dismayed or fallen into despair, because we have also just James Baldwin said, hope is invented every day. And every time I was visiting one of our schools yesterday, and every time we see our youth, we get reinvigorated, re-energized. So just highlighting some of the challenges. And again, this is not just in education, it's human nature, but particularly when you're trying to change a system level change, just the resistance to change or modify, or sometimes the change is so incremental that it doesn't make a difference in the outcomes and the lives of our children. Institutional racism and funding inequities. We know that fortunately, Pennsylvania is trying to move toward more equitable funding. We know that there's a bulk of the money that still goes through the old formula and only the new money. So we're fortunate that we have legislators who are pushing towards that, but it's not all the money that is there. A lot of it is still inequitably funded. And then continuing to address the shortage of Black teachers. And I'll share this interest. They did research, Black teachers have the highest attrition. So they're quitting at higher rates, but they also had the highest levels of morale. So high morale, even though they're leaving. And so part of the work, they said, is because they get so much joy in pouring into students, even if they feel like it's not sustainable. They have the highest loan debt, so, we're talking about the black-white wealth gap. All of these things are connected. They also had the highest morale, which meant that they feel like they are doing work like education for liberation, and they are feeling like that's the outcomes of their work. And so we have to make sure that it's more sustainable so that they can feel that high morale, but it also translates into sustainability. And again, the opportunities, hope, but with strategy, continue to do that. Paula Freire would often talk about critical hope as a tool and a technique to advance the work. In community, we don't do any of our work not being in community with others, and so we're constantly working together with people around the country to advance this work. I share with Chad, but a little over a year, right early on in this current administration, there was a anti-DEI, several orders around that. One of them being around schools. If they did any work around diversity, they would lose funding. We knew it was unconstitutional, but that was still put out there, and many universities and districts just rushed to implement anti-DEI work, either shuttering their programming, laying people off, etc. We joined a lawsuit with the ACLU and the National Education Association, one of the largest unions in the country. And just recently, we won that case. And the agreement was that the U.S. Department of Ed will not appeal it. So we're fortunate, but we would not have been able to do that alone. We do that in community with other organizations and the many, many people who continue to push back on this idea that diversity is a bad thing, that centering human experience and bringing in varied perspectives, experiences is a bad thing. We resist that. And then to last couple of slides, just to summarize, we look at educator, what recruited me into teaching was when Dr. Martin Ryder, a veteran Black educator in the school district of Philadelphia, said, El-Mekki, I see that activism, the purest form of activism is teaching Black children well in the city. That gave me a spark then, excuse me, and it continues to give me a spark that form of activism is really about ensuring that we are teaching and teaching well, teaching effectively, but also inviting them into the profession and making sure that those who serve them the closest, those who are nearest, and those leading classrooms also experience equity and justice. And so as a part of this, and you'll see some of that picture over there with the teacher sitting down, Mama Wayma, that was one of our teachers at my elementary school. And just the impact that they made, centering literacy. And we want to just continue to make sure that we understand that racial justice and educational justice are inextricably linked. And one of my elders told me at one point that there's some people who are focused on racial justice, but they ignore educational justice. And there are others who are focused on educational justice, but they ignore racial justice. Think of school reform, where they're like, oh, we got to do educational justice, but they didn't think about how do I center communities. So they ignore racial justice. We won't reach either if they're separated. They're inextricably linked. Racial justice and educational justice. You can't separate them and achieve either of them. I want to thank you. We can be followed at Center Black Ed, on all the platforms. I'm hoping we can have a little bit of a dialogue, because I believe we still have time. So if there are any questions or even just comments, we'd love to engage with the community that you all have here. So again, thank you. And thank you for your work. As again, just the fact that, centering humanity is an integral part of any kind of civic society that's going to be just, and that is the crux of you all's work. So appreciate you all, and thank you again for having me.
Wow, thank you so much, Anita. Let's jump into comments that might be in the chat. Anyone that wants to come off and provide comments and feedback, please do so. I'll just say that this was phenomenal on so many levels. When I started teaching as a professor in 2006 at University of Penn, a person that you and I know, Dr. Walter Palmer, handed me a book by Pablo Freire, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, that taught me that the best classrooms were student-centered classrooms. And I've been using several books, but Pedagogy of the Oppressed and his other book, Pedagogy of Justice, since 2008, and my 2 race relation classes at Westchester University, where I still teach. And for those who don't understand that, most of our education is centered around rote memorization, right? A, B, C, D, E, F, G. If you was to ask someone, what's the 15th letter of the alphabet? Most people have to go through the rote memorization. But this presentation was just really, really phenomenal. And looking forward to hearing some feedback or questions that people have for Sharif. Let's get started. Wow, this was phenomenal.
There's one really great question. Well, we have a lot of thank yous. So thank you again. I have to definitely echo what Edie is mentioning, but there's a question here, and I think it's really interesting because when I was even speaking with Tony, he blew my mind about something that he mentioned that he knows from working with you. But is it the school teacher tenure system that helped create the loss of Black male teachers? But I think you can go a little bit deeper into that too. But can you speak to that as to the loss of Black male teachers in our educational system?
Yeah, and I'll start even further back. The biggest disruption to the Black teacher pipeline was the Brown versus Board win. So you can think about that, the Brown versus Board win, like we lauded that, and it was, on paper. And if it was implemented the way that it should have been implemented, that could have been a colossal win. But what happened was, one, my friend Chris Stewart says that often Black kids at that point, they're the new cotton. So they were just funding attached to them. So the federal government basically said, if you accept this integration, you'll get federal dollars. So you might hear like Title I and federal dollars, and if you don't get it, then the federal dollars are taken away. And as we know, there were some districts like Virginia and other places, they said, we will shut our district down instead of integrating. So imagine the school district of Philadelphia saying like, no, if we're a student from that demographic group, we're going to shut the entire system down. That happened. And then there are other places that said, okay, we will take these children, but we will not take the adults.
Mm. Yeah.
The children have money connected to them. Their Title I dollars connected to them. The adults don't have any dollars connected to them, and we don't want them teaching white children. We don't want them around our white staff. And so you had principals who were offered jobs as janitors. We had principals who were laid off. We had teachers. Dr. Leslie Fenwick, she did research. It's called Jim Crow's Pink Slip. Because what happened was Jim Crow wasn't dismantled, but so-called desegregation was happening. So there's basically 100,000 Black educators were fired, demoted, or laid off. 100,000. And we've never really recuperated, from that.
Yeah, that's a fairly new phenomenon. That's a fairly new. I think people really think that happened a long time ago. It's fairly new. It's a couple of generations back. Thank you for mentioning that.
And her research said, when you say a couple of generations, even like 50 years ago, they were saying in the 70s, she pulled up all the hearings that were happening around the country where Congress was starting to ask, like, hey, where are all the Black teachers? And it was noted that in Congress, they taking testimony as far as like, oh yeah, well this percentage were fired to make room, even though they were more credentialed than their white counterparts. So they were having PhDs and doctor and master's degree, and their white counterparts would have a bachelor's, but yet they were laid off and fired.
Wow, thank you for that. I was hoping you would mention that because when I spoke with Tony, he mentioned that I had no clue how that impacted, the generations when it comes to the hiring, and Black males in the educational system. So thank you for that.
And then I'll just tie it because I'm sorry. I would just tie into the question asked specifically about Black men, and I would push that continues to be part of the experience of Black male. So, for example, LaSalle did a study here in Philadelphia not too long ago, and this is very similar to what we would see. Both the Schott Foundation used to put out data as far as Black boys in schools, but in Philadelphia, like almost 84% of the young Black men had no post-secondary experience at all. 84%. And this is dated, but like that is part of it, right? So if they're not finishing school, or they're not college ready, or they're not getting degrees, that impacts the teacher pipeline as well, right? And so we know that. So that's why we can't just be at the end of the road and say, hey, we need a teacher. We have to think early on, okay, how do we support someone who aspires to become a teacher? How do we invite them into the profession and support them along the way? We can't just wait at the finish line and at college graduation and set up a table and say, hey, we're recruiting teachers, and ignore all of the issues and challenges that they'll face in their pre-K through college experience.
Sure. I was going to say something, but I want to go here because there's other people here, and ED's probably like, need to stop talking.
No, it's fine. I love the exchange, but I just wanted to see if there were some other questions and comments for Sharif that's in the chat, or if anyone wanted to come off of mute to ask a question.
Sure. There is one in the chat here. Oh, so
ED. It's
hey, Chairman.
Good to see you.
Good to see you as well.
So just some personal experience. So I'm Jewish. My father was a lawyer. My mother was a school teacher, kindergarten, for 30 plus years in public school. When she was born in the 30s. So when she was growing up in the 40s and 50s, the only real profession that they were allowing women into was teachers. Okay, there were no law schools accepting women. I don't think there were medical schools accepting women. So you kind of grew up thinking that that's where you were going to go. And literally every one of her grade school friends ended up becoming a teacher. Okay. Like, how do we encourage that type of thought process with young Black men to think that teaching is a worthwhile profession for them? Okay. Because again, most of the women who grew up in and around my mom's time, I wouldn't say they were steered towards it, but there were teachers' colleges. In fact, my mom went to a teachers' college. I mean, could we have specific teachers' colleges? I know there are colleges in our area that are known more as schools you go to if you want to become a teacher. Like a lot of our friends now in Bucks County, if their children want to become a teacher, they end up going to Westchester. Okay.
One of the largest
So
producers in our area.
yeah. So how do we kind of create that at an early age, like you're saying? And then the other question I raised in the chat was, what are the school administrators doing? The school boards, like when you look at the city of Philadelphia, the majority of the school board are African American. Many of the senior administrators are African American. They should be making this a priority. Are they making it enough of a priority? And how can they do that? Okay, to achieve the end result, which is, as you're saying, trying to encourage more Black men to go into the teaching profession.
Two great question and framing, and you're absolutely right. There were, limited possibilities, and I would add some nuance to it as well. There were limited possibilities, yet at the same time, the motivation for a lot of the Black women to become teachers was around the activism. They literally looked at, you know what, there's no liberation without education. So it was that added activism. And I think that ties into like how we've been approaching even our framework. Like as I mentioned, we share, hey, Dr. King's work, Ida B. Wells' work, Carter G. Woodson's work. That is part of like why we believe we have 30% of the students participating are young Black men, because it's connecting to like, okay, how do I. So here's an example. When I was a principal and we were still doing, formulating this work, we would have these Why I Teach tours to visit schools around the area. As you can imagine, we have assembly. Most of the students, hey, you're interested in becoming a teacher? Most of them wouldn't raise their hands. You have a couple. But then we started asking them, who's been accused of being a leader? You have more hands raised. Who supported someone, mentored someone, de-escalated someone, helped them with homework? More folks raised their hands. Who's interested in social and racial justice? Just about everybody raised their hand. Who wants to give back to their community in a way that will continue to have an impact even long after you're gone? Hands continue to raise. We're like, you know what? That's the foundation of being a great teacher. They're like, what? That's teaching? Because they hadn't necessarily looked at teaching as leadership. They just like, oh, it's a teacher, right? And also, if you go through pre-K-12 experience and nobody helps you interrogate your experience, hey, I've always was raised to think the most important question was, how are you experiencing my leadership? And how often are students asked that? If they're asked that more often, how are you experiencing my teaching? How are you experiencing my leadership? I'm leading a classroom, right? Like that introduces it in a different way as opposed to, oh, do you love this content enough to teach? Which is unfortunately how a lot of people are recruited. Do you love this? And they're like, yeah, I love the content. I don't really love the kids. I would like it more if we had a different set of kids. But this content, oh my gosh, it's so beautiful. I'm so inspired by it. We flip that. No, suppose you're inspired by the children. And part of Black teaching traditions that I think also helped, when there was less possibilities, it's about training your replacement. So if you enter that profession because you're like, this classroom, you're going to replace me and my generation in a way and I'm going to make sure you're prepared. And if you're not unprepared, it's my fault. That accountability. That's a different framework. And that is what we found to be attractive. Another example, we raise funds. That fellowship that I talked about, the 40K, we only usually raise about $1 million a year, so that's about 25 students. Last year, we were just blessed to be able to quadruple that. but we had almost 800 applicants. Many of them were young men. So they're interested out there, but the barriers to getting there, sometimes it's hard. It's so much smog and confusion about how to do it. I spoke to somebody yesterday, like, my parents said, don't become a teacher. You know what I mean? So it's a lot of headwinds. But you raised that's a great point. And as far as the district, so out of our 9 schools that we're in now, 6 are in Philadelphia. So I would say they've made it a priority. We've been pushing that affordable housing, teachers should be included in that because they're starting with lower salaries. And, many service professions, whether it's social work or other places, right, that they should be deliberately creating housing opportunities. Places like, there are many places around the country, California, New York, DC, teachers can't afford the districts that they teach in. There's some cities where the teachers, they're making a longer roadway in the from college because they still are basically in dorms with a bunch of roommates because they can't afford it, right? Because if you're starting a salary of 40 something K in this economy, and the work that's being called on to do, that's not Philadelphia's, I think Philly starts at 50, 55, but so yes, I would say they're making it a priority, and we're also encouraging them to push even more. So we're going back to the table and asking them. Matter of fact, our team is meeting with the superintendent's deputies today about our summer programming, Freedom Schools, and raising funds in different areas to make sure that we have more program to support. Philadelphia, I think this year said they're hiring 2,000 teachers. 2,000. It's about 800 into 1,000. So, I read an article where they were looking for 2,000. So that means, but we can't just wait for at the end of the road, right? Like at the end of the colleges, because as you mentioned, there's fewer teacher colleges. Cheney doesn't have graduate school. Lincoln doesn't have undergrad for education. So we have to expand the pipeline, and we have to do it much, much faster, not just with the city, but with the state, and at some point at the federal level as well. Although I don't know if they're going to be very receptive right now. So we might have to really focus locally, city and state, and maybe even the regional opportunities. But thank you. 2 really, really great points.
Yeah, I think
now.
I think the idea of more teachers' colleges makes a lot of sense. The same as more technical schools make a lot of sense. Like they've been talking about how artificial intelligence is going to eliminate a whole lot of professions. Well, it's not going to eliminate the kind of professions that you learn at a technical school.
Exactly.
But a lot of the school districts they used to have tech schools, and they don't have tech schools now. So there's a lot that could be done to make sure that that things change for the better. But definitely more programs to allow people to become teachers would be great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Yeah, really great questions. Thank you. I don't see any more questions in the chat. I know there are some questions here as far as a lot of thank yous. Thank you for the information. There was a mention of a women's medical college that used to be called Drexel, or that's now called Drexel. I know that name. Someone's also mentioning how they get in contact with you.
Yep,
So I don't know if you have that.
I'll put our website, and I'll also just go in our email.
Yep. Let's see here. I know we're beyond our time, but this is really good. So, I don't think if you all are still here, we're still here. If you don't mind, El-Mekki.
No.
Okay, thank you. Yes, all right. I don't see any other further questions. And our recording will be on our YouTube channel. And once we wrap up for today, you all will get that also in an email that our communications director sends out to everyone. So this was great. I learned so much. As far as even having a more of a diverse idea of the pedagogy that's more centered, it was just phenomenal to hear that. So thank you. Just getting a lot of thank you so much for a wonderful discussion. Just best wishes on the continuation of this. I know here in Pittsburgh, we need it in this western region of our state. We have some in the area.
We're hoping to get over there. Yeah, I graduated from IUP, so Pittsburgh's my second home. I often did not feel like taking a bus across the turnpike, so I would go to my roommate's house up on the
Oh,
Hill District.
sure. Oh, yes.
Um,
Great. Yeah.
so yeah,
Yeah.
so we're actively trying to figure out. We were in conversation with Brashear,
Okay.
a couple years ago, but we are eager to be both in Pittsburgh and
Okay.
Harrisburg and a couple other places that already have a diverse pipeline of students to tap into, then invite
Mhm.
them to one day serve the Commonwealth as leaders of their own classrooms, schools, and districts.
Oh, that's
Anita,
great. That's great to
we
hear.
have a hand that's up.
Yes. I think we
Gary
have.
Horton over here from Erie, Pennsylvania.
Oh,
Hi,
Gary,
Mr.
how are
Horton.
you?
I'm a
how's it going?
sitting school board member.
Good to see you.
My daughter is assistant principal at one of the middle schools in Erie. I'm a
Awesome.
1975 graduate of Cheney and a former member of Cheney's Council of Trustees. I'd like to
Okay, all
see
right. You
how we
can't have
might.
HBCU without CU. So,
Right.
shout out to the Wolves.
Amen. I'm gonna get you up here to Erie and maybe do this presentation um, in Erie before our Board of Education and our superintendent, if we might, or even a virtual meeting. But it's an issue we're wrestling with, of course, and I believe we're in a position to maybe make some things happen. And
I would
what you just presented is a good place for us to start.
thank you. It's great to meet you. And you know what? A couple years ago, I was actually supposed to come out to Erie, and it ended up, I think, getting canceled. So I would love to revisit that. I put my emails in the chat. Please reach out to me.
We'll do.
Gary,
Same,
how's your
Mr.
brother
Horton.
doing?
You're quite welcome always.
Your,
Keep the invites coming.
yeah.
I jump on when I can. I'm certainly happy I jumped onto this one.
Good to see you.
I learned a
Glad you're
lot.
here.
Yeah.
Good to
Yeah,
see
you
you.
look great.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. For just had my birthday, the 10th, turned 74.
Oh,
You look
So
wow.
I
Happy
feel
Happy
pretty
birthday.
good
belated.
too. Yeah.
A
And
blessing.
Fantastic.
It's a
your
blessing.
brother's doing good?
My brother just won a seat on the Erie City Council.
Read
And
about that.
so my being on the school board and his being on the council, we think we can get not just public school support, but maybe the support of the city as well, since our new mayor is an advocate for youth and bringing jobs to Erie and all of that. And she's a former school director. We certainly see the need of diversifying our workforce, especially in the teaching ranks. And now we're in a good space, and now's a good time for us to try to move forward on that. So
Right. Good to see you.
I'll tell my
Thank
brother
you.
you asked about him, and thank you so much.
Please tell your brother that we
Thank
asked
you.
him about him, and please continue to hold PHRC up to high standards. And that's one thing I've admired about you and my nearly 8 years in this divine calling by God, is that you don't have a problem with critiquing us and making
Yeah.
sure we're doing what we need to do. And so we have a new outreach coordinator in Anita Levels.
Right.
And so, we also have Dr. LaDawn Robinson, who's in her second year as our regional director in the Pittsburgh office. So we're right
Yes.
next door. And so you've never been shy of letting us know what we should be doing. And so, as you know, we are being as we become. So those things that we need to be doing, both in the Pittsburgh School District and the Erie School District, please let us know. And I know that between you, your brother, and David Dix, you all are going to make sure that we're doing right by the people. And that's what we're about here at PHRC,
Amen.
under the
Amen.
leadership of Chairman Bolstein, servant leadership of myself and everyone else. Brother Sharif, thank you for educating us. And this will not be the first time, the first and last time we're with you. We want to be able to support your conference in a real way. And I think there's just so much more that we kind of need to learn. Our chairman and Dr. Raquel Yanks, who's our educational commissioner, we need to put you in touch with her as well, to continue to look at education across the landscape and anything that we need to be doing. Once again, PHRC, for the last remaining kind of 18 people on here, we are a civil rights enforcement agency. We're in a lot of spaces. We have a PHRA, we have a mission, we have core principles, but we're also open to people that will share with us, hey, You need to know what's happening over here as it relates to xenophobia, homophobia. You need to know what's happening over here with bullying. You need to know that there's a shortage of Black male teachers. You need to know what's happening over here with immigration. We're always open to that. We're always open to that. Our mission doesn't lean us in one particular space. It's about humanity. And we are careful not to allow mission creep to come in. But what you just presented right here is giving me a lot of kind of thought processes of things that we need to do. We need to connect with our civil rights division, with the freedom schools. We need to figure out ways that we can kind of bring young people together. We have a Black Jewish kind of relation thing on college campuses, but we need to be doing more with our HBCUs and more with multiple individuals. OC levels, I'm going to depart from here so that we can get going with some other stuff we have to do. But yes, man, this has just been electrifying on multiple levels. I see Rich almost here. Rich, did you have a question for Sharif? Because I don't mean to call you out, Rich, but you're in Lancaster. No, you're in Reading.
Quiet.
Rich, you're in Reading, so you see a lot of things with students of color in Reading. Rich? Yeah, I thought that's Rich. Rich.
I think that's him. Yeah. Yeah, that's
Hey, Chad, I'm jumping
trying
off,
to unmute.
Can you
Sorry.
give me a call?
Who's that?
Gary Horton. I'm jumping off, but can you give me a call when you get a chance?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it won't be today, but it'll be by next week.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hey, I apologize. I was trying to unmute.
Rich, any questions that you may have or comments for Sharif, because you see what's going on in Reading, and you know, former Secretary Mumeen is there. Dr. Mumeen is back in this district. Anything that you might want to ask Sharif in this moment before we leave?
No, actually, I was really in getting a lot of notes taken down during the presentation. So I'm looking forward to getting the audio copy, because here in Reading, we're dealing with basically the same thing, just going towards the Hispanic race, because students want to see their own, and Hispanic population is growing exponentially here. And so we're going through the same kind of thing. There's Reading actually called together both community, the schools, and the businesses in a Rich Harwood kind of situation, where we're bringing groups together and discussing how we can improve the education within the city of Reading.
Fantastic. Yeah. And I would encourage you to think of recruitment and retention.
Exactly.
So many are only focused on the recruitment part, but the retention is even more important. But no, keep up the good work, and any way we can help or support, we're happy to.
Definitely. Thank you.
Well, thank you all.
Anita, thank you. Appreciate you.
Appreciate you. We'll be back in March. We're going to have our Women's History platform of Women Heritage Month, and so we hope you'll be back with us. We'll have that lineup for you. But Mr. Sharif, thank you for being with us, and thank you for your extension of your time. We appreciate that. Please enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you for the work that you're doing. We honor you for that. So thank you for being with us today. Everyone, enjoy your time.
You all as well.